Hello everyone, how you guys doing? Hopefully you guys are having a wonderful day. Today we are here with a video on the best route to build your account in old school RuneScape. Is this technically the best? I don't know. There's, billions upon billions of permutations of different ways you could build your account, so there is no way that I can tell you for certain that this is the best. However, this has been my favorite and a route that I've just enjoyed greatly, and it's progressed me very, very well. These are currently my stats, so I mean, we're kind of up there, but that won't be going through all of this. This will only be going basically through the first 20 episodes of my progression series called Free to Play to Max. There will be a link to that down below if you want to check that out, but this is basically summarizing the first 20 episodes and kind of giving my rationale as towards what I did. As far as the fundamentals towards how I built this account and how I think most people should focus their accounts, there's really four main things. The first one is questing. Questing unlocks a lot of different content and content that you will have to unlock at some point, so the earlier you quest, the better off you are. In addition to that, skilling is going to be important. I mean, skills are ultimately what builds your account, and no matter at what point you lose money, maybe you get hacked, maybe you get scammed, no one can ever take your skills away from you. And early on, the higher that you can get your skills, the better, because a lot of the good money making and XP methods are going to lie in the higher range of skills. In addition to that, you're going to want to find your money makers. You're going to want to just get some money makers that you enjoy and end up being pretty good GP an hour for what you can do at your level. And then finally, you do have to spend cash to make cash. Now, I only recommend spending cash when you know you have to. Don't get upgrades early, like don't buy a ton of prayer upgrades if you're not going to be using prayer. Same for construction. Don't build your house if you're not going to end up having money for gear to actually be able to use your house for the PVMing type activities you want to. So that's the basis of how I built this account. Let's go ahead and break it down episode by episode. I'll basically be going through what I did in each one. I'll put the quest completed for each episode along with the moneymakers that I primarily use and the stats that I ended up with by the ends of those episodes. So kind of gives you a good idea as far as how I chunked everything off and, in what order I did those things. So let's go ahead and get on into the first episode. Now, episodes 1 through 4 are in free to play. There are some decent things to do in free to play, but honestly, if you don't mind buying membership, it is beneficial because you'll unlock things like stamina potions and better moneymakers that will allow you to progress through the early game quicker. I was trying to show people how to make money for a bond, so that's why I kind of stayed there maybe a little longer, but at the end of the day, everything I did in free to play was moderately efficient in the sense that it's probably how I was going to have to train in the quest I was going to have to do anyways, so it's not that big of a deal, really just up to you. I'm not going to read through all the quests, I'll just kind of tell you the gist of what I was going for. These are just some early quests that you can do in the game without really any requirements, and they're very quick. As far as my money makers, I was killing cows for cowhide and chopping oak logs, which was okay. There's really not a lot of great money making methods in free to play, especially at low levels, so that ended up working out for me. And then skill wise, I got 20s in combat, got my magic up a little bit, and woodcutting as well. So going into episode 2, I didn't do any quests this time. I was kind of focusing on money most of the time in free to play because I just wanted to get out of it. So I ended up buying a lot of arrows from shops. That's not as good now. It used to be really good, but the meta for what you can buy in free to play shops is ever changing. So you're just going to want to try and test out a few things depending on the time that you watch this video. And even then, I mean, you could get your magic up a little higher and go for some better money makers if you don't find anything you like in a shop. As far as the stats, I got a decent amount of magic up this episode along with fishing and crafting. Moving on to episode 3, I did a lot of quests this episode, mostly just the easy to do free to play quests that I didn't think I was wasting too much time doing in free to play. My money makers included, again, arrows from shops, telegrabbing, Zami wines, and law runes in the wilderness, honestly, are probably the two best moneymakers in free-to-play, other than maybe ogresses, but those are kind of higher levels, so as far as what you can access at a low level, Zami wines and law runes are really, really good, and what I would recommend you grind for a bond with if you are going to do that. And as far as the stats, I got my magic up a lot more and focused on my woodcutting a bit, which was pretty nice. Then episode 4 was really just the grind to get out of free-to-play. Did a few quests that I didn't think took up too much of my time, and as far as the moneymaker, I just ended up grinding Zami wines as much as I could, because in my opinion, that was the best way to get out. And for the stats, I got my range up to 30, smithing up to 29, and cooking to 40, just some decent gains there. And then episode 5 was the episode I actually got out of free-to-play, so I did do a lot more wines, but really it was kind of the meeting point between free-to-play and pay-to-play, so did a decent amount of woodcutting and fire making too, and got my melees up just a little bit more before before leaving free to play. If you're not into Zammy wines or something along those lines, you could always do like fishing or wood cutting, but that's going to be a lot slower. But it will kind of be a skill that you could get up, and it won't be too burdensome. And moving into episode 6, we'll kind of get into doing a lot more quests as I get into pay to play. I should have mentioned this a little sooner, but as far as the progression order, it is from bottom to top in terms of what quests I did. Really doesn't matter too much with the free to play quests, but eventually in the members line of quests, you'll have to do some before others, so make note of that. Really just a couple free to play quests and a couple easy members quests, so was pretty nice. And then in terms of moneymakers, I did lava dragons and bracelets of ether. Lava dragons are a risky and not great moneymaker, but you can get your magic up there and make passive money on the side. And bracelets of ether is a method of charging every bracelet of ether with one piece of ether and then high alching them. It is a really, really good money making method for low levels. However, it is a bit click intensive, but I think the trade-off is more than worth it. I'm not someone that ever likes to play the game insanely click intensive, but I did do that method for a lot of my early game money making. Then as far as stats, I got 64 fletching and 60 mage were the two that I really boosted in that episode. And then in episode number 7, did a few more quests, nothing too crazy there. In terms of the money makers, I added burning amulets to the money making methods that I was doing. Honestly, really enjoyed that, so I'd recommend if you want more of a skilling money maker to go for that. Just making them from scratch and charging them is pretty good stuff. And then I also added death runes to the shops that I was kind of going to, but the death rune shop is now not good. Like I was saying earlier, the metas for shop buying always change. Not something that's going to be as applicable now, but there are definitely other shops in pay to play that you can still do. And honestly, I mean, you could probably just replace this method with high alchemy more bracelets of ether, which would in theory actually help your account more than buying stuff from a shop anyways. And then this is the first episode where I really spent a little bit of money on skills, and that was with herblore. Got that up a decent bit. Herblore is always going to be something that's going to cost me a decent bit. In addition to that, got my crafting up to 51 as well, which was pretty notable, and got on that agility grind. Then after that, this is where I really kicked off in questing as far as pay to play goes. There's just a lot of quests there, so you can read through them from bottom to top of column 1, then bottom to top of column 2, and then 3. That's the progression of it. The very first thing I have listed is the Varrock Museum. That's not really a quest, but it is something, if you do it, it'll get you up to 9 Hunter and 9 Slayer pretty quickly, just for completing it. And early level Hunter is awful, so I would definitely recommend that. And then in this episode, I ended up getting my agility, herblore, and prayer up a decent bit, so spent some money there, but again, nothing too much. You don't spend too much money on buyables at this point. And then on to episode number 9. For this one, I did a couple quests that are notable, Dragon Slayer and Heroes quests, kind of OG quests, but nothing too crazy that I'm getting unlocked there, just stuff for the future. Continue to do bracelets of ether because I was really enjoying them, and getting my magic up was important to me. And as far as the stats, I got 40 agility, 48 mining, and 55 cooking were kind of the notable upgrades for this episode. Then at the halfway point, number 10, as far as the quests, I didn't do any this episode. Really, there's kind of a trend here that I either do a lot or very little, and I mean, that's kind of the way I like to quest, honestly. I either bulk quest or I don't really quest too much. As far as the moneymakers, this is when I added Slayer to my money-making methods. I honestly do promote people to go and try Wildy Slayer. I know it's a bit terrifying if you're a low level, you're scared to go out there, but I have made a video on how to kind of escape the wilderness and escape PKers, so if you want to check that out, feel free. I mean, honestly, it all just comes with time and practice and just getting used to it. As long as you're not carrying too much of a risk on you, it's not a bad thing if you die. No one cares, It can be scary for some, but if you're not risking much, it shouldn't be. And then in addition to that, I started charging glories and rings of wealth. This was a better money-making method at the time, but it's still good, and you still have that shot at an eternal glory. So as far as my stats, I ended up getting up to 60 attack and strength and 40 slayer, and this is where I really do promote Wildy Slayer as well, because you can get the Vigorous Chain Mace, which is a boosted form of the Dragon Scimitar that if you use it in the wilderness has a 50% bonus to it. So it is much better, and that's kind of why I like Wilderness Slayers, because of those weapons if you can start to afford them, and they're pretty cheap now compared to what they were then. Now on to episode 11. This had some more useful quests, really what I was going for here. Wanted to get my Ava's accumulator with animal magnetism, then the Wanted and Slug Menace quest line unlocks you prayer gear, so I got some of that in the form of Initiate. And then Horror from the Deep unlocks you some god books that are good for Wilderness Slayer because they're cheap and they can upgrade your stats and give you prayer bonus as well. The moneymaker here stayed the same with Wilderness Slayer, which is kind of why I did those quests. And then as far as my stats, I really focused on my melees and my Slayer as well, and ended up getting up my Hunter a decent bit. And the only real money I was spending at this point is I finally started to add cannons to my task just to kind of speed them up, and because I had enough money that cannonballs weren't going to break the bank. On to episode 12. Here I started to work on range a decent bit. Couple quests sprinkled in there as well. Nothing too notable unlocked there. Just kind of things you're going to have to do eventually. As far as the money makers, I had Wilderness Slayer, ranging green dragons, and crystal keys. I did a little bit of the crystal keys just to try to test them. Sometimes they're good. They're not anything too spectacular though, and they're not really progressing your count at the same time, which is why I opted more for the Wilderness Slayer and the ranging of green dragons. Both of those getting up my range while also making me some money. And also to note, back then Wilderness Slayer only had emblems. It didn't have keys and all the weird stuff it does now, so it's probably a little better now compared to what it used to be. But yeah, I definitely did enjoy my time out there. Then much the same in episode 13, just kind of still progressing my range. I also did end up going for a Dragon Defender in this episode, so that's something I would really recommend you get once you can get into the Warriors Guild. It is going to be very useful for your account. And I kept the moneymakers really the same, just, you know, condensed them down to solely Wilderness Slayer and Green Dragons. And again, I was using a cannon for Wilderness Slayer and Green Drags to speed up how much money I was making and the XP that I was getting. Then next in episode 14, we had some pretty big unlocks. I ended up doing Monkey Madness because I was going to, you know, want the Dragon Scimitar for whenever I wasn't in the wilderness, and that was unlocked through that quest. Also did Creature Frankenstrain and Elemental Workshops 1 and 2. The moneymakers stayed much the same with Wilderness Slayer. I mean, I'm someone that just, I feel like you're going to have to go through those low to med levels of Slayer, and the best way to do it without getting tasks you absolutely hate is with Wilderness Slayer, and you'll make money at the same time. Do prefer it to Konar for the most part, and honestly, the points that you get from Wilderness Slayer are going to help your account later as well, so just really, really nice stuff. I ended up in this episode getting my prayer up to 66, so a decent amount of money spent there, and also got 47 agility. Then next in episode 15, we continued to work on just kind of the same stuff I was doing before. This is kind of like a little, I mean, you could call it a rut, but it is what you got to do. At some point of your account, you have to kind of grind certain skills, and Slayer is definitely a skill you have to grind. It's not quick. So this time around, I didn't do any quest. I kept my money makers again to Wilderness Slayer and Green Drags, and pushed my range up to 75, along with my Herblore to 62 and my Prayer to 70. So spent a little bit of money on Herblore and Prayer, but I mean, with how much money I'm making with Wilderness Slayer and Green Drags and Bracelets of Ether and all that stuff that's accumulated up until this point, it's not really going to break the bank. Now, I did get 70 prayer this episode, and I'm not sure if I would recommend that. You really should get 70 prayer once you think you're going to use piety a lot, and I was not using piety a lot at this point. So I would probably wait until maybe the end of episode 20, basically the end of this video. Just push it back a decent bit, but if you feel like you're going to use it a lot, then go ahead. And then next with episode 16, did a decent bit of quests here, kind of more along the Mauritania quest line. Yeah, just some overall good quests to complete here, in my opinion. As far as the moneymakers for this episode, I was doing a lot more skilling and questing, so I decided to ramp up my flipping. Honestly, flipping is something I recommend people do most of the time on their account if they understand how to do it, because it's just passive money you can make. But during this episode, when I wasn't doing any form of a moneymaker, I felt almost obligated to do a decent bit of flipping, so I made a little bit of money that way. As far as the notable skills, I got my smithing up to 56 and 62 cooking as well. Started doing gold bars for smithing because those are very, very quick, so started spending a little bit of money on that skill. Then next we have episode 17, where I actually got a couple untradeable unlocks that are not noted here, but a Slayer helm and a fire cape. The fire cape's more whenever you can do it. Personally, I recommend people to have 75 range and 70 defense. If it's your first time going, those two stats are going to help you out a lot in terms of gear. But if you know what you're doing, you don't need that by any means. I mean, again, Jad's been completed by a level 3, so Slayer Helm was pretty helpful. And in terms of the quest, I didn't do any again. Moneymakers, I actually moved to Konar Slayer now because at the time it was relatively new and I just kind of wanted to test it out. And I'd got my Slayer up enough to where I wasn't going to get just horrid tasks from whoever I went to. So decided to mix it up with Konar. Honestly, a decent alternative if you don't want to go to Wildy Slayer, but I do think Wildy Slayer is better. And then I spent a little bit of money on crafting during this episode as well. Then on to the final 3 episodes. Episode 18, did a decent bit of quests here. Underground Pass is notable in that line because it's probably the worst quest up until this point that I've done. I also ended up doing revs for this episode because my range was finally getting high enough to where I felt comfortable doing that. Really recommend revs once you can start to get your range up, and that's kind of a constant of what's been happening on this account. I really started to focus range at this point because I think it's the best combat skill because it's just so useful at a lot of different money-making areas, and it's only one stat you have to train instead of like melee, you have to train attack and strength. With range, it's just one, and range is more beneficial than mage in most scenarios. So started to push my range here, and also got my cooking and farming up a good bit in this episode. Then episode 19 is where I really started to ramp up my range. I didn't do any quests, I just did Venenatus and revs for money, which is really where the meta moneymakers start to kind of come in. I mean, it's not meta for high level players, but as far as like a med level player is concerned, Venenatus and revs with a decent range level is exactly where you want to be in my opinion. And yeah, I was just farming money at this point and really starting to build my bank up. And then episode 20, kind of finishing it off, was doing a lot of the same. Didn't do any quests. Continued to do Wildy Slayer, Venenatus, and some flipping as well. Didn't do as much revs, but eventually I will get that back into the mix. I just honestly enjoyed Venenatus more than revs at the kind of med range area. Once you get above 85 to 90 range, revs is a lot better because you can start to take people's kills. You're not going to get every kill taken from you, but early on it is a bit difficult. And the main stat for this episode was up to 73 magic, but my range at this point was looking mighty fine as well. And so that's all the stuff that I did to get me up to episode 20 of my series, kind of where I feel like I broke out of the early game material. I hit 1400 total. I had about 30 mil in the bank. I had enough quest points where I felt pretty comfortable for going to Barrow's Gloves soon, and so I felt like my account was at a decent point at large, and hopefully that will be a good starting point for you guys. Obviously, you know, if you watch this video one time through and you don't remember all of it, that's fine. If you're building your account, I'd recommend just kind of go through this slowly and maybe take it step by step if you want to. If you ever need more of an explanation on what I'm doing, obviously that series that I'm talking about, Free to Play to Max, will be in the description down below, and you can watch that for the longer form of what I did. But as far as an overall summary, I mean, range is the most important combat skill in my opinion, so definitely recommend pushing that. Don't spend money until you have to. The main spots that I'm talking here are prayer and construction. A lot of people want to rush construction to get a nice looking house, but if you don't have like PVM gear or you don't do PVM methods that need a house, then it's not that big of a deal. And you can always go to House Party World and use other people's houses while you're kind of at a lower bank value. So you have that option. In addition, some skills can wait. For instance, rune crafting, construction, and farming. Unless you're going to end up doing rune crafting for something profitable, I don't really see any use of it early on in the game. And construction and farming are two kind of money sinks that unless you're doing herb runs, then I would recommend farming a little bit, but I don't do herb runs personally because I'd rather just train my account during that time. And then finally, quests are the way to go. You're gonna have to do them eventually, so there's no point in really pushing them off other than, yeah, you might be a little lazy, and I get that. You know, I'm someone that my very first RuneScape account, I didn't get Barrow's Gloves till I was like 120 combat, so by no means am I roasting, I'm just saying. But yeah, that is going to be it for me today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, make sure to leave a like. Anything you want to tell me, let me know in a comment down below. And on top of that, if you want to see more videos like this as soon as they go live, make sure to subscribe. I'll also be streaming live on Twitch later tonight. If you want to check that out, feel free, link below. And with that said, hopefully you guys have a wonderful day, and see ya.